So, Thomas, welcome. We
Thank
are
you.
excited to jam with you, especially since it's been a bit since we've caught up.
Mm,
We first met some years ago back at the company that you were at, Beachbody, now Body, and a company that just famous for delivering transformations.
mhm.
Physical transformations, emotional transformations. As we were doing the work with you and Carl and others and the like. Just kind of remarkable to hear how some of your biggest supers, in many respects, started from a very interesting and deep place of pain and hurt and use that to channel into physical transformation, which is so amazing. So at some level, you're very familiar with the creator capitalist journey. And then you let us know that you left and went out on your own. And as you were building your own solopreneur practice, which is awesome, we were excited about it. We'd love to just jam with you about your reflections on why did you reach out to us? I mean, you'd heard about us through the work, obviously, that we were doing with your prior company. But why did you reach out? What were some of the pivotal points? I remember a lot of gesticulating around the whole
Yes.
contribution margin
Yep.
conversation.
Yep.
And so walk us through your journey of learning about category design. What did you learn from the teaching part of it? And how did the transformation occur for you?
Let's start with what you're doing today, Thomas. Give us your no sell sell on what category you're doing today first.
Ooh, okay, so the epiphany through the academy was to be a margin growth architect, and really focused on D2C. And the and the problem that I realized that I could solve through operational excellence and through drilling into true understanding of contribution margin from not being an accountant was the financial misalignment that many, in particular D2C companies, have as they scale. And as Chris had pointed out, there was the 13 deadly sins of financial misalignment at scale. And probably it was about halfway through the academy when that epiphany really hit. And we had that jam session back then. I think it was like May or April. And it all sort of fell into place. I realized the track I was going on. And so now I work with a variety of clients, big and small. Some are public companies, but have smaller D2C enterprises and do restructure. And restructure is a key part of this, where the financial misalignment has gone too far. So the kind of companies I work with now are big public companies, but may have small D2Cs, which have been growing badly because they've grown at scale. They've had a lot of money thrown at them, and then they haven't aligned. There's been a financial misalignment as they scale, and that's a risk I've seen before when money is thrown at startups. Also, established D2C that want to grow to the next level, but don't have the operational excellence in place. And there's a high risk of financial misalignment. And then I tend to, although I'm doing less of this now, but small D2C who are moving through the scaling process and just want a helping hand on not making the mistakes that I have witnessed over the years.
But Tom, can I just niche down a little bit? Because I remember part of the fun journey that you had was you started out as like people going from the US to the UK
Yes, exactly.
expansion, right?
Yeah,
That was the
exactly.
original problem you were solving for. But your clients sound diverse, and yet the problem, I was thinking of Peter Thiel's book, 0 to 1.
Hmm.
Do you have kind of a financial range of company or brand that you solve for? Is it 1 million to 10 million? 10? It sounded like there was a pattern when you were sharing a while back about the
It
companies
was,
within the company you're
yeah,
working.
you're right. It was really interesting because part of that journey, I'll probably just go through the journey a little bit, but answer this first, is when I was looking at the first part of what I wanted to do as I joined the academy, and I had this very clear vision that I was going to take US companies, which is what I've done for a long time, into UK and Europe. And it's something I had a lot of skills in. I'm using operational excellence as the mechanism to support that. And as we went through the academy, I realized that those companies needed to have a certain structure and a certain size in order to make that work. And I realized to get this right, you needed to be a certain size and you'd have to have the right level of investment, etc. And of course, as I alluded to, that kind of didn't go full out the window, but it kind of went out of the window as I realized that niching down a little bit into it all and taking a slightly different direction was really where I was at. I started off with, I suppose, 10 million or sometimes 5 to 10 million pound dollar companies. Then I started to move up a little bit, and I've moved up because the opportunity to make a bigger difference happens at the larger companies. However,
and Thomas, sorry, can I interrupt you there?
Yeah.
Did you also experience the phenomena that a lot of people experience, which is the amount of effort it takes to close a $10,000 deal or a $100,000 deal or $1 million deal? It's not exponentially different. I'm not suggesting $1 million deal is as easy to close as a $10,000 deal, but the relative effort as you go up the curve, so to speak, actually comes down. Is that what you experienced?
It pretty much that. And there's slightly different conversations, but the level of effort was the same, especially on the operational excellence piece. There's a mixture of restructure anyway, and I'm doing restructures, but the operational excellence requires a restructure of losing people and then rebuilding as part of the process of the operational excellence. And smaller organizations struggle more with that because they have had people in the organization for so long and they've been very loyal, and then they're just not the right people, and you have to have that very difficult relation. Whereas bigger organizations are they're more used to that dynamic. So it is slightly different in the way you have to approach that as well. And there's sometimes when you're in the organization, from the level of effort on smaller organizations just feels like you can never get enough done in the hours that you've given them. Whereas big organizations, you can tend to get stuff done. There's more support and the impact is more immediate. So there are a few different things that you learn along the way. And I'm still learning a lot of those things as I go. And I'm finding that doesn't mean I don't enjoy it. I actually enjoy some of the little companies more because the fun of, rolling your sleeves up.
What it's such an interesting niche, really lightning in a bottle, that when you say it, it's so obvious, but I'm kind of like hitting myself like, why didn't we see it earlier? Larger company entrepreneurship. You're exactly right. The smaller companies are wonderful, but they bring baggage and they've taken the big risk. And, at some level, I can see how it's harder to let go of somebody who's been with you from day one, who's just not ready to scale to the next level versus somebody who, obviously corporate restructurings are the name of the game with it, right? And so that niche is super interesting because you niche down to a narrower super consumer. I would argue the problem that you're solving got bigger because US to UK expansion is pretty narrow.
Yeah.
Contribution margin, figuring that out to scale profitably. There was a moment you said you were talking with the new prospect that turned into a client and they were like, well, blah, blah, blah. And then the guy said, you want to grow? And you're like, well, profitably. And then they were like, well, what did you just say?
Yeah, exactly. It was a moment, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's such an interesting paradox or juxtaposition. You niche down on the super, the exact kind of company that you were looking for, but you leveled up on the problem, larger organizations. And in contribution margin, none of us are CFOs or accountants or whatever, but it's such an interesting space. You don't really go to Deloitte for that. You could go to McKinsey for that. I think about the CFOs that I've worked with. Not all of them kind of nerd out about that. It's this interesting financial metric that nobody really owns, and therefore becoming the prime minister contribution margin, which now you become, was an open seat that nobody saw. Can you explain that a little bit?
I'll give you a little bit of my background because I think that what you said on just the idea of category design in the first place, I had cut my teeth in what direct commerce. The originally big book mail order, and then shopping channels like QVC and Shopping Network, and then into infomercial. And that's where I did a long stint in infomercial with various companies in various countries and saw a lot of really cool products that we essentially kind of redefined and created a category for. Everyone remembers the NutriBullet, for instance, is still a massive product. And we were working for the company at the time that supported the international launch of that. And nobody had heard of countertop blenders. We created a category of countertop blenders. And so I got the concept of category design in that respect. And then when I was at Beachbody, as you say now, and the CEO had read the book, and I think it's been said a few times on various podcasts, the story of how he got in touch. One of the pirates was a super consumer of the product, and it kind of and so you guys and one of the
just so that people don't who haven't heard it, we literally were making fun of the 8-minute abs scene in There's Something About Mary, which Carl had created 8-minute abs and was like, I made that and they're making fun of me about the movie. So as usual, content about the content about the content for the win.
So
Anyway,
legendary.
That was an epic moment. One of the things that Carl did a lot when he read books that were epic, business books, was to tell the team, hey, I'm reading this and I think this is great. If you want to read it, then these are my thoughts, kind of thing. I often took that advice and I read a lot of books on his recommendation. And this was one that really struck me. And because he had the same recognition that infomercials, which we'd come from, grew up in the same business, and we just got that concept, that premise of what we were doing. And Christopher, you weren't there. I think you got to go to. We were doing a big event in Arizona. Christopher was there, and I got to know you guys just from that. I had my book. I knew Christopher was coming. I said at the end, "Hey, sign my book," and that's where everything sort of spun from. And then, as luck would have it, a few different things happened, and I left Beachbody, went to another company to do essentially a restructure. I'm not really thinking through much what I was doing, but my whole pitch for the job was, this is what I want to bring. This is what I can bring. I've been doing this for a long time, and we're running infomercial companies in different countries and getting involved in rolling your sleeves up and doing operational stuff all the way back. I remember, so as long as I can remember, when I was looking at, working in fashion straight out of university, big book mail order, in the back of the 90s, we had an epiphany. My team had an epiphany around the concept of customer returns at that point and the importance of that on contribution margin. Essentially, the model was that a apparel item would return sometimes in a catalog season with 6 months. A t-shirt might return 6 or 7 times in its life. And nobody was counting that. And in terms of how much it cost us to put it back into stock and rework it, because they all got reworked and repackaged and sent out again. And we suddenly realized that t-shirts, for instance, were selling then for less than £10, were losing us money the third time around that we sold them. And every time after that, suddenly that gave us the opportunity to strip the catalog of every single product that returned high. And of course, the game was contribution margin. Why is this important? We called it contribution margin engineering at the time. And I took that into every single gig I did after that, every single job. I was straight out of university, but I took that knowledge into every single job. And it taught me so much about returns, about rolling your sleeves up and looking at operational matters, as well as being a marketer. I knew how warehouses worked and how call centers worked and how returns worked, all of those things. And so that was what I came to you guys with.
Dare we say contribution margin design? Dare we say that?
Yes.
And you know what's so fascinating is, you tell me, Christopher, in the world of marketing, infomercials, there's a certain hierarchy, probably not at the top of a peak there. Listening to you talk about it, Thomas, you're exactly right. I would bet any executive entrepreneur with infomercial experience is going to be a good category designer, because long form marketing is education, which is what you need for category design. If you're on an infomercial, it's because Target ain't taking you. Like, what the heck are you? And it is a pretty significant push your chips in the middle, buy the airtime, hope the phone rings after that. I think about the upfront marketing costs. I had not considered the return cost, which is another problem because you don't have stores to return them to. It's hard to imagine a better dojo for you to have built your contribution margin design skills.
Because when I was doing infomercial back in the older days, it was call centers with telemarketing and the customer service. And I grew up in the world where the internet shopping and Amazon came online while we were doing this, and it kind of complicated what we were doing. But we didn't have, good old days of call centers. You knew your attribution from a marketing point of view. You knew where every single call came from. Where every single time you did an advert, you knew that you put a unique number on that. You got exactly the number of callers registered, and that gave you your cost per acquisition for that particular spot. And of course, that made it even more, you could then drill down. We had a spreadsheet with an input for every single cost that we could, and that led down to reeled into our contribution margin. And that's how we what in the old days, Christopher may remember, thinking about marketing, we called it an allowable. It was the amount you were allowed to spend while still making a margin. And that has been replaced. And I talked about this in some of the jams we did. This concept of target CPAs or allowables got replaced in more recent years with ROAS, which is like, frankly, a bullshit term, but relative to contribution margin, which
Tell
is
us
really
more
important.
how you feel about it. Tell us more about the ROAS thing. Please, let's go down this rabbit hole.
Well, you can. I've
Could
been in
one
companies,
say, Thomas, that ROAS is ass?
You could say that. It's for me, it's just a vanity metric.
Well, no, let's nerd out about it. Unpack why. Tell the world why.
Wait, first, for the non-financially minded, what is ROAS?
So return on advertising spend. And it's what every platform, whether it's Meta or Google, will tell you what they're at. And everyone's very keen to tell you what your ROAS is. But it's a meaningless unless you understand what ROAS you need, because it's not telling you what your costs are underneath. And it's certainly not telling you what your contribution or your profitability is like. And so you can have a ROAS, and I've worked in organizations where they've had ROAS, but the ROAS might be 4, but they're still losing money. And they might be losing product money on every single thing, but they're losing money overall. And that's the problem.
Let's nerd out a little bit on the math. And as Kat described, so ROAS, do the math and juxtapose a 4 ROAS versus where on the contribution margin calculation would you have caught that, like, that's a bad idea?
Well, that's what the problem is, that you can have anything on the ROAS scale, but no one is measuring the contribution margin or the costs or the actual profitability. It's broadly, when you work, especially when you work with agencies, it's just an assumption. No one's saying to, like, you might say, hey, what, and this is, funny, we talked just before, like you were saying, this contribution margin is something that no one concentrates on. It's a financial problem, it's a marketing problem. Is it an operational problem? And reality is that the marketers, the marketing department, the brand team might be talking to the agencies, or they're just working out the finance guys are looking at everything, but they're not necessarily, and they might be looking at contribution margin, but they're not registering it under the individual operational costs, because they think that the operators, the chief operating officer or the various operating directors of different parts of the organization are looking after those individual components. So what you've ended up with is, on the one hand, ROAS, which is a metric that just tells you how much your return is on the advertising spend. So just a multiple.
And usually it's just revenue, not gross margin, right?
Exactly.
So,
yeah.
Okay.
And
so let's enumerate the problems. Just let's make Thomas really angry, and that's good.
Hold on, before we do that, when that's all they're measuring, here's what we know: they were never poor.
They were never poor. Yes.
Because if you grow up with nothing, the only thing you're focused on is what's left after, aka profitability. Exactly. Because you can't buy groceries with ROAS. What you buy groceries with are profits. And so people who are not focused on profits and how you get the profits, gross margin and all the good stuff, were never fucking poor. Because anybody who ever had to sweat the rent, anybody who ever had to deliver newspapers, anybody who ever had to have their mother's car break down on the way to school understands that you can't buy groceries with ROAS.
100%. Amen. And often the people who are talking about ROAS are not the ones involved in the operational part of the business. So the operational excellence has already gone out of the window, because they're not talking to anyone in this new world order where, especially with work from home, it's even more siloed than it was when we were all sat in buildings sometimes we were sat in buildings with the actual warehouse underneath us, and we could see what was shipping and we could see what was coming back. Lots of that's gone now as well. So it's even more important to really understand what makes up the contribution margin. What are the individual components? And they're all levers that you can use to improve your target CPA.
Okay, wait. Let me just do the math on this, just so that people get at least some, maybe a handful of people will like this part or not. But like, we just had the Dude Wipe CFO on, Thomas, and he was going on about how much he hates EBITDA. He loves free cash flow, right? And so like, it's a similar type of.
And sorry to interrupt you, Eddie. What most people don't understand is the only number in business that is not an interpretation is cash in and cash out. Everything else on the financial statements, income statement, balance sheet, every other number other than cash in and cash out is an interpretation.
Which is perfect. So ROAS is an interpretation of something positive or whatever else it is. It's the numerator is not detailed enough. You can't take revenue to the bank. Gross margin, okay. Contribution margin is a far better metric of that because
Exactly.
you account for cost of goods, fine, but there's obviously sales and marketing costs that are factored in there, but you're not getting all the way down to depreciation, taxes, and all that kind of jazz.
Exactly.
So you got that part, and then on the numerator, the denominator part, ad spend is not the only cost incurred, right? And that's the other point of it. Ad spend is one cost, and then it's so interesting about contribution margin. Yes, you factor in operations, but there's an element of the lifetime value that like follow the entire journey, and when you account for the cost of selling, the cost to make, the cost to sell, and the cost to serve, then you might end up with something that looks like a contribution margin at the end. So what's fascinating about ROAS is that it's a number like 4 that doesn't mean anything. Like,
Yeah.
what does that
Yeah.
mean? It's a multiple of whatever. Contribution margin, this is where you don't need to correct me, is typically it's at a product line level. Is that how I think about it?
You can do it on the whole organization, the whole
Yes,
business,
okay.
but I tend to do both. So I'm looking at it from an individual product and individual product's performance, and that helps with you to drive what I would say the target cost of acquisition. But also you can do it on a corporation level. There's lots of different ways. Campaign level. There's loads of different ways to skin.
So let's take those three. And sorry to nerd out about all this, but I like it. So company level, it's without getting into the gap stuff about taxes, it's a cleaner metric, probably closer to a free cash flow number than is that fair?
Yeah.
Pretty comparable in that regard. And then at a product or business unit level, like we should not be in the t-shirt business. Let's get out of it type of a thing.
Exactly.
Which is huge because a lot of times, Kat hits our hands all the time with this. If simplicity is velocity, complexity is death, right? There's going to be stuff that you think makes money that is actually destroying your business. Get out.
Exactly.
When I've seen CEOs do turnarounds, like the first thing they do is SKU rat. They look at all the SKUs and they get rid of the bottom 80% that drive 5% of revenue, and lo and behold, margins and cash flow all go up as a result of that. So there's that level, and help us understand it's a greater level of precision. To what is your go-to when you're serving a client? Like when you see the eyes light up and they're like, Thomas, we love you. Please stay, we'll pay you more. And they tell their friends, what's that experience like when you deliver contribution margin? Is it at the business level, the product level, at the campaign level? Like what gets people super excited?
Imagine if you think about it this way, if they're looking at individual product level and you can explain to them that ignore the ROAS on this particular campaign for this particular product. Let's go and lay out the profit and loss, for want of a better word, for that product. And then let's build that out. And then let's look at what we can realistically afford to spend to acquire a customer. And then let's focus everything on that. And now let's spend against that. So, let's say we've got this book and we're gonna spend against it. We've done the P&L, and we know that to acquire a customer with a comfortable contribution margin, maybe we're looking at a 20% contribution margin. Let's throw some arbitrary numbers around. Then we can
and
spend
20% refers to what? Just make sure we understand that.
So what I'm looking at is from a revenue perspective, breaking down individually, and I won't really geek out and go into the levels of contribution margin. There's like 1, 2, 3. You can go deep, but essentially what we're saying is that as you break down the various costs of the business, and you think about this from a P&L point of view, from just when you're looking at typical management accounts, as you go down the layers, each layer there's a percentage as you break down of the revenue number, and so as you break that down, then you're getting to a percentage, and you need to define what that percentage is for your business that then covers the remaining costs that are below that line.
Okay, so let me summarize. So number one, the first thing you do is you shoot all the liars, right? You're like,
yes,
ROAS is a lie, that's a lie, that's a lie, ignore all that stuff. And that people are like, oh, cool. Okay. So you get rid of the lying with the truth that happens in an organization. The second thing that you do is what Christopher said is cash is king. Cash is what you take home. And so The 20% number is your truth-telling metric by going through the accounting with a forensic microscope and saying, look at, for every $100 of revenue you generate, there's $20 of honest to goodness margin contributed, like net cap. There's a $20 bill that is left that you can go take, you can buy something with, you can pay somebody
Well,
with, you can do something with.
The other way to say is your contribution to overheads. So it's the contribution margin is really a thing. If you think about it that way, and because there's still some lines of cost below contribution margin, but it's the contribution margin that covers those that means that you can still pay your bills at the end of the day. And that's what you're really looking for. The more you can grow your contribution margin, then the more you can afford to cover your bills. And that's probably is the easiest way for someone on the outside to understand it.
Perfect. Number one, you reveal the liars, right? And you tell the truth. Number two, you establish a benchmark. Hey, of all your businesses, all your products, all your geographies, however you want to cut it, high to low contribution margin. Number three, I suspect what you do is these are the levers that increase and decrease contribution margin. Therefore, you good old start, stop, keep doing. Got a $20 contribution margin, 20% contribution margin. That's your highest one. The fastest way to grow top line and drop more cash to the bottom line is to keep doing this, start doing that, and stop doing this. And then 20% will become 40%. And then lo and behold, everybody loves Thomas and Thomas loves them and everybody's happy with that, right? It is a beloved product, gets put out to pasture, a beloved campaign, a beloved customer you have to fire. And so you end up telling the hard truth that people probably in their gut knew was like, yeah, I shouldn't be in this business, but I don't want to do the hard thing with it. You put the mirror to their face and you say, this business is fat.
Exactly.
It's going to kill you if you don't get rid of it.
And that's sometimes hard for them to understand because they've built up this, and I have a good example of a client and that had a very successful, on the face of it, very successful beauty business online. And yet their loyalty points were very generous. And so we're impacting everything they did. And when you actually took an analysis of the number of points that were being used because they were so generous, I would pull a report for them. And I said, you realize, and I gave them a spreadsheet, all these orders you shipped today, you made no money. In fact, you gave them away off with points only. And the cost of that to the business was this much.
Okay. I just realized who you are, Thomas. You are the greatest business wingman ever out there, right? Because you solve the problem of beer goggles. You say you do the hard truth. That person may look good from far, but they're far from good. So stay away.
You can argue though that was a really good argument where they were like, well, but they made the purchase before and we gave them points because they were good customers before and they're going to be good customers. But they were giving too much away in the first purchase, and so every other purchase became hard to make money from because they were too generous. Also, you'll be aware from probably old articles around the airline business where these points sit on balance sheets, and sometimes that's a good thing, and sometimes that's a really bad thing. All of those things you have to bring to their attention, and it is a really big mirror sometimes when you've got hundreds of thousands of dollars of loyalty points sitting on a balance sheet and you don't know when, are they going to run out? Because sometimes they don't run out, which is worse. So,
the interesting thing about all this is in all companies, there is folklore. There's myth that gets told and believed in. People with feelings have a very hard time with facts, especially if those feelings are predicated on some company folklore around what our most important products are, what our most dynamic markets are, what our most profitable customers are, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then Thomas, in many ways, you're the guy going, hey, look around the curtain. And somebody in marketing or finance or sales or products who wants people to believe their thing is really the thing when it's actually not the thing, who's invented some kind of a metric that says it's the thing when it's actually not the thing, is saying, hey, don't listen to Thomas, pay no attention to the little man behind the curtain, right? And Thomas is going, hey, there's a little man behind the curtain, not a giant bucket of profits here. Pay attention to the little man.
Exactly. Yeah. And you have those moments of clarity with development. And I think because I have been around and I've seen these things and I grew up before the internet. And so I'm taking the same conversations that we were having with Big Book Mail Order and with live shopping, and the same level of care that we had to take in that business and applying it now in a D2C online business where most of the kids haven't had that experience. They don't understand those nuances and those little things that happen along the way. I've worked in warehouses, run call centers, all of those things that you don't get to do anymore if you're in the marketing department or if you're just doing creative. And that's where the fun starts.
You need to have cross-functional experience. You need to be a mixed martial artist in business. And you've got me thinking about some of my greatest hits of contribution margin I can think of in my career. One was the ballpark hot dog business. Part of the reason why it was successful was because we ignored and walked away from a kosher hot dog business, which at face value, highest price per pound, seemed like a good thing. But guess what? Really expensive to run a kosher certification, really expensive to have a separate plant, really expensive when it's underutilized against the dominant market leader, Hebrew National. And then my whole Velveeta experience was going to Kraft and telling them, like, that natural cheese that you're all excited about, contribution margin is at best 0 because you're not processing it. And for all the baggage that comes with process is adding value at some level in some way, shape, or form. And the most processed product you have, Velveeta, has the single greatest contribution margin, because and Kraft was just full of this. I think the highest margin CPG product that I've ever seen was in the Kraft portfolio that everyone ignored was A1 steak sauce, because incredibly incremental. They put very little marketing behind it. And besides the nice glass bottle, it's liquid. Cost of goods was bupkis, and I think they had like pharma margins in it or something like that, or whatever it was. It's almost hilarious. Like if you were to take the over under, like Thomas, you should have a game show like The Price is Right. Which one has the highest contribution margin? And I guarantee you, everyone would get it wrong.
I guess what I realized was that everyone is getting it wrong, and especially in e-commerce and where there's lots of focus, and you see these guys on all of the events as the panelists, and they're talking about how to scale your business to get this ROAS and how to win at this. And that was the thing that really needled me, is that I knew that scaling like that is not going to, that you suddenly come a cropper, you suddenly run out of cash. And that's where the restructure piece came in, having had a lot of experience of that.
We learned this, Thomas, back in the .com days, remember? It's like, well, we're losing money on every product. Yes, I know, but we'll make it up in volume.
Yeah.
Okay, well, scaling stupid makes you more stupid.
But you know what's funny about that, Christopher? When you said .com, I saw Mark Andreessen posted about pets.com, one of the poster child of the flame out, right? Burned $182 million of capital. But if only Thomas was there to save the day, because they had the category right. Digital pets, Chewy, it's a $60 billion category.
Chewy today?
It's immense, right?
Which is proof. Once the category sees it, they can't unsee it. Yes. And even if the category king screws up royally, as pets.com ended up doing, and listen, in fairness to them, the .com bubble bursting took out a lot of people. However, the category design was exactly right. But so the market then waits for the new solution, because somebody framed a problem. I want the problem solved. The person solving the problem, who created the problem, pets.com, is gone. Ta-da. There's what in politics they call a power vacuum. It's just called a category vacuum.
Yeah. But what's so fascinating about it had, I suspect, if they burned $182 million in capital, and maybe that's what happened anyway and stuff. But if you had somebody watching the contribution margin at the time, maybe the runway gets extended. Maybe they don't go bust and they can survive the .com boom. And maybe they are what Chewy is now today. And so it is an interesting marriage of category design and contribution margin, of like great category design. It's that adage of, was it an unstoppable force meets an unmovable object? Cash is the unmovable object. You run out of cash, you can't do your category design.
Exactly. We had that when one of the jam sessions when we were talking about this, and what did it mean? Like the brand, we're talking just brands are trying to scale, and they're getting bigger, they're not getting more valuable. It was that whole concept: revenue's growing, profit isn't growing. Where are we up to? And then we hit expansion black hole. That was there was a moment in one of our jams where we had this expansion black hole, which is where we kind of got to with this, that you can do all of this stuff, but I guess the black hole is a mixture of when the money runs out as well. For you, the black hole also opens up and swallows you at the same time.
Thomas, I have a hard question for you. You talk about it so differently now than you did when we were working through this with you, 6 months ago, 8 months ago. But knowing what you know now, you have this crazy background in contribution margin. You grew up in it. You were steeped in it. And yet when it came to talk about your superpower and what you were going to do, it wasn't on the table. And I'm so curious why and your thinking and how that flipped, because it seems so obvious, but it wasn't obvious to you.
And I don't really know the true answer, apart from maybe what I chose. What I thought I was doing something that really interested me, that I thought was fun because I'd done it for a long time, which was taking products and moving them across the ocean and making them successful. And I hadn't really thought about what the next level down was of that. And it wasn't just about the product. It wasn't finding great products. It was finding the operational excellence. And the operational excellence was down to the contribution margin levers. And then we got into and that was where the aha came.
So Thomas, if I could, I love where Kat's taking us. Where in the discussion during the academy, as we were talking about your own category design, of course, and your own superpower, what were the set of insights? Were they around that, or were they around different things, to Kat's point, that gave you the language that you now have to communicate the difference that you make, aka the category of one you are, when we all remember when you came into the category, and I say this with love, respect, and admiration, when we asked you, hey, Thomas, what do you do and why does it matter? There was a lot of yada, yada. I don't know what Thomas is talking about that showed up. And now there's real clarity. You have a clear point of view. There's a clear enemy. There's a clear problem that you're solving that you frame around ROAS, et cetera, et cetera. So how did you get?
It was super weird. It was so weird because it kind of happened in this sort of epiphany. I remember it so clearly because I was late to the call and I was trying to listen on my phone in the car, and then I got back to my desk and I managed to get a jam session in just in before we closed. And there was a few things that happened. The original concept, I was really struggling with iterating, as you say, and I was struggling with the pipeline. I think we discussed the concept as well. The pipeline was so damn long. And I was also kind of concerned about how I could fund that long pipeline of moving product over and how I was going to bill for it in that way. And we had some heart-to-hearts with Eddie over this. I only had a few messages back and forth plus the jam sessions. And it was only in that jam session where I, maybe shaken by my head a little bit on, when we
Thomas,
talked about this.
I don't remember the heart-to-hearts. I'm sure we had them. Can you, just for the people who are going to be in the academy, what was that like? Because I'm sure some of it was not pleasant.
You were so respectful on the calls and in the messages, and always very supportive. But at the same time, you're like, dig deeper.
I must have missed that call where we were respectful, because generally
you weren't on that one. No, it was very much dig deeper, look harder, niche down more, focus on, and we just kept pushing and pushing and pushing to find the next. And sometimes you would just say, this doesn't sound right, or this is off by this. Go back and look at this, or think about this again. And you might remember in the academy, we have the different sections that go month by month. And I think I did this first 4 sections maybe 3 or 4 times over and over again, because I just knew that something was off on the very first month. When it's off in the first month, I then got to the second month and I was like, something's still off. So I'd go back and redo the whole thing. And then every time you made a comment, I was like, still something's not right. And then twisting, and I was really contorting to try. And I ended up trying to fit a square peg into a round hole from my original concepts, and I just wasn't thinking hard enough about it. Through those conversations, and then the real aha, where you really pushed me in that last jam, where it suddenly was like, say that again. That was the moment I came off that, and it was like a light bulb. And the crazy thing, because I was super worried at this point. Spring was coming, and I'd given myself till Easter that year to really get my shit together. And my wife was also kind of said, come on, it's what time's getting on. And I was feeling a bit of pressure, to be honest, because I'd been just wouldn't say DOSing. I'd spent a lot of time just working on the academy stuff, and I had a few clients doing a few things, but nothing was going to pay the rent, as it were. And that moment was just something just triggered inside me. And I had a couple of meetings completely unrelated, funnily enough, to what I was doing. And I walked into one office to help a guy, funnily enough, about the category design problem he was having. And I was like, let me walk you through that. Let me see if I can help. And I walked into his office, and at the same time I was telling him that someone else in the other side of the office was having a problem with a particular company that they were shareholders in. And they said, hey, how are you doing? What are you doing now? And I literally iterated what I was doing now so clearly in exactly that way. Yeah, I do this margin. Yeah, I'm a margin guy, and I work on contribution margin. And they're like, we've got something going on right now. We'd love to. And 3 days later, I'm like sat in meetings restructuring an organization for them, and that was like the first sort of, and then within days, I had another random
Thomas. So you just described a 3-day sales cycle. What did you think the sales cycle?
But the 3 days was them just getting their paperwork together. The sales cycle was like 30 minutes.
Okay,
that was
30
the
minutes.
Wild thing.
What was it before that?
I mean, we were talking months. I mean, I think I'd asked you a few times about like, hey, I've got this. I don't know how to price for this particular thing. And how do I do this round? I'm now worried about round one. Am I giving them too much? Am I giving too much away? What do I do in phase two? How do I finish this? Because there was this whole long cycle that I couldn't work out how to price. And you were very kind, but you were also like, you need to think harder. This isn't going to work for you, and you're not going to make any money. And also, I wasn't valuing myself properly previously. But all of a sudden, this iteration allowed me to really value myself.
So when you value yourself, I'm hearing you went from a sales cycle that, let's call it 30 weeks, down to 30 minutes.
Yep.
And all you had, the magic words.
So hold on, Eddie, help me with the math. When we take a sales cycle that used to be 30 weeks, and we shrink it to 30, we said seconds.
30 minutes, I think he said. But yeah.
30 minutes. Okay, let's go 30 minutes. So 30 to 30 is what percentage reduction in sales cycle time?
That would be 3 orders of magnitude. What would have been 30,000 minutes, 30 weeks, took 30.
And why, Thomas, if you could, sorry to interrupt you, if you could kind of crystallize for us, how do you go from 30 to 30?
So in that conversation, it was just having a really clear vision of this is what I do, and this is why I do it, and this is my experience of why I do this stuff and how I've done it in the past, and do you want it or not?
You know what, Thomas? I remember observing at the time, and Kat totally is right. We see it now, is not only did you have the right languaging, and not only did it kind of, you backed it up with like decades of outcomes that you had, your swagger is way off the charts. Different. Different.
That moment, the swagger changed so dramatically. I just had such clarity at that point. It was just something very, very different. It just, everything triggered. And I think that also the difference was that when I previously talked to people about this is what I do, even when I was throwing as much swagger as I could at it, didn't feel like there was a confidence in that. But it held the room. The concept held the room. And that was the fundamental difference, because no one talks about this stuff. And so it's not news to them, but it's fascinating.
Okay, so hold on. Let's break this down. So is what you're telling us, when you have a radically different point of view that frames, claims, and names a problem that others view as a highly strategic, important problem, and you communicate that in a unique, compelling, differentiated way, they, A, want to solve the problem, and B, assume you're the guy. Is that what you just said?
And also understand the value of solving the problem.
The value of your value. Yes.
There you go.
Excellent. Said with some swagger. And of course, Thomas, it must be declared, you do have an unfair competitive advantage with that mustache.
Thank you.
He's got a sexy man stash.
I would also say, I'm asking Grok, how many accountants are there in the world? Millions, right? And I'm asking how many finance people. There are loads of people, loads of books, textbooks, articles, whatever, that have been written about this stuff. And you basically went into the heart of the lion and said, I have found virgin territory that nobody has really declared their expertise with. Because I can't think of Deloitte, PwC, or Bain Bees. Like, I am the head of the contribution margin practice, and there should be one. There absolutely should be one. Actually, you know what the closest thing? Christopher will remember this. The Stern Stewart guys, economic value added. Do you remember these guys? They made a whole cottage industry about like net operating profit after taxes and no plat and blah 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 blah, and after you minus your cost of capital. And it's very similar, I think, to contribution margin. What you're doing. They are the last people that I can remember that made any sort of a splash or any kind of claim to fame around this kind of a thing. And so, that's why, we weren't joking when we were like, I think Thomas is the prime minister of contribution margin. That territory is available to you. And it's striking how many finance nerds that there are and nobody's to claim that territory, probably because it's hard. And probably because it is not cookie cutter. Because the thing that these consulting practices love to do, you establish a practice to get leverage because you want to hand off the magic playbook to the junior doobie so that you don't have to do the work. And then your contribution margins go through the roof. When you have something that is bespoke, custom, difficult, and requires some battle scars and gray hairs, hard to build some IP around that.
And the fun thing is that in this line of work, especially on the restructure where it's bigger companies, I get to hire consulting companies, big international consulting companies, as the support, because they don't do this. As
tell us a story about that. You don't have to share names, but tell us a story.
So wait a minute, wait, slow down here, because this is very important. So if at its core, category design is about radical differentiation, and as part of that radical differentiation, it's about establishing new value perceptions. What you're telling us, Thomas, I just want to make clear, is people hire you to manage their genius strategy management consulting people?
Yeah, to the point where
let me just be clear. Your category design around contribution margin has elevated your value above that of prestigious management consulting firms, such that major corporations who hire these firms hire Thomas to make sure they get the most value out of the smartest management consulting firms in the world. Is that what you're telling me?
That, but one layer more fun is that as part of some of this role, I hire the fancy management consultant company to support the work that I do.
That you're doing. They're downstream from you.
Yes.
That's called strategic category design. That's called elevating yourself to the top of what's called the value stack. Please continue, sir.
So because I'm a one-man band, so I can't do all of this stuff on my own. And sometimes you're in international markets and you can't be in every place all the time. So I have a great contact in some big consulting companies who are really, really good at things like the operational restructure, and they do operational excellence pretty well, but they maybe don't do D2C in that way. But I understand the contribution margin. I understand the importance of being a margin growth expert, and I understand how to put that into practice, and I have them do that.
I've had this before where when I went out on my own, I had a client, president came to me and was like, do you have a preference for McKinsey or BCG? I was like, why? He's like, well, we're hiring one of them to do this work, but they're gonna want to do the super consumer part. They won't know what they're doing. You need to manage them, so you pick the one that you want. And it's super fun. And I've seen other people do this where, and these other firms, and I'm sure, Thomas, you're friendly to them. Like, I guarantee you, those partners are not happy to be working for you with that stuff. They will smile, they will play ball because it matters. But
But
it is not
because
their
what
preference.
you've done is you've dislodged their position on the value stack, right? The management consulting firms have always tried to category design themselves in such a way that the CEO and the C-suite and the boards view them as the most strategic advisor, the trusted advisor on whatever set of topics, right? And most people would say, well, you can't get higher than that. You can't be higher than McKinsey or Booz or Bain or whatever on that. Those are established category positions in the value stack of who we go to that is most valuable to help us solve our most important problems. That's settled, like gravity's settled. Maybe not. Maybe Thomas just taught the world that everything is the way that it is because somebody changed the way that it was. And you just changed in your niche down category design around contribution margin that you are the category king, the prime minister. And therefore, as an individual person, you have raised yourself above fucking McKinsey.
And kudos to your clients, Thomas. Like, it is actually the smart way of doing things. So back in the day at Anheuser, when they were thinking about getting into wine, they hired 2 McKinsey teams. One was build me the case for getting into wine, and the other was build me the case to not get into wine. And I actually think it is a smart way to use experts on that, because when you're doing category design, you don't know what you don't know. And so this is amazing on that front. I will tell you that I don't know what you're charging as of late, but it should be higher. Just based on what you just said, it should be higher.
For sure, yeah.
Those people charge
learning
a pretty
along the way,
penny.
right? Yeah, and I know that because I have to be part of the sign up,
Now
and
you know.
so I can see how the checks are going, and I'm like, I need to charge more. And that's the part of this brilliant process of being in the academy with understanding how to talk about that and language it really well so that you can feel confident about how much you bill.
Well, because you know what's, I'm just playing with Grok as we're talking, Thomas. I'm like, do any large consulting firms have a contribution management practice? None of them do, right? So so you'd be the first one out. And I'm looking at it. Deloitte has a margin improvement practice. Okay, fine, that's ops or whatever, right? Bain has a profit cube, revenue growth. Whatever, they're selling software. Maybe it's McKinsey has a pricing and margin management. That's a pricing, like, it's so interdisciplinary. Effective contract management, like, these are all subcategories of the meta category that you are describing. And that the reason why you exist and why you have a pricing opportunity is for you to actually replicate at McKinsey or Bain or BCG. You need an ops partner. You need a pricing partner. You need a marketing partner. That's an expensive team. That's probably 3 teams, each of them charging $1 million a month. And so exactly as you were saying is like, look, to do the work, it's hard. You're going to need to hire a ding dong consulting firm at a run rate of $1 million a month. So here's where I will add value, making sure they all do their work correctly and towards the right thing. Getting the work done in 4 weeks versus 8 is a 7-figure upside for you. So I'll just take half of that or whatever the math works out to be, right? But like, it's an amazing place that you've netted out. And it's so funny, man. Like, we need some sort of animation about Thomas at the top of the value stack and all the minions running around.
Yeah, it's such a wild journey.
Yeah.
Really. I don't think I could have believed that a year ago when I was just about to join the academy that this would be where we landed. But yeah, I'm sure glad I did.
Say more about that. Why did you not think you'd land here? Just walk us through what you thought where you thought you'd land and where you landed.
I just had this, I had this sort of vision that I would, have these US clients, and it would just be, I'd be traveling backwards and forwards, and it would have all these platforms, and I'd even looked at, what more could we do? We could do Europe, and then we could do Middle East, and we could, we'd support them on Amazon in all these different places. And it was such a roll your sleeves up, not super strategic. And the more I got into it, it was like really hard work, actually, and a lot of grind for not as much money as I really should have been thinking it was possible to. And then as we go through the process, I really, get called out on parts of this. And I think in the academy, as you go through the documents every month that you've got to fill out, and you have to be super honest with yourself. And I was, very honest and brutal. And I knew that when things were wrong along as I was going along with this process, but I knew I needed to stick with it. That was why I just didn't ever really expect to get to here. This is what I love doing. And I have, I work with a few clients. I work very long hours at the moment because I've got a few clients that I've stacked up, and I'm, I'm relatively new to this consulting gig, and I haven't worked out that you don't have to work 24 hours in the whole day. I haven't figured that bit out yet, but why wouldn't you work 24 hours if you're going to get billed for those? So I'm like, that's the bit I have to get across. So I'm working these crazy long hours, but I still enjoy every moment. My first call every morning is at 5:30 in the morning, and I don't finish my call sometimes till 9 at night. And I go to bed and I'm knackered, and I wake up and I do the same thing. And I don't ever not have a smile on my face in the work I'm doing, because I feel like we make progress all the time. And I have managed to meet really fun people along the way as I've done this, and meet some really interesting people and have fun conversations about solving big problems.
So I'm going to ask, as the contribution margin, and with any level of detail that you're comfortable sharing, how do you feel about the return on investment from the academy? And I'm going to ask it two ways. How do you feel about it? How would you describe it? And how does your wife feel about it?
My wife was actually, when I first wanted to do this, the first time I wanted to do this, because I wanted to be in the first cohort, and I'm kind of glad I didn't, actually, because I don't think I was anywhere near ready, and I wouldn't have worked in the same way. I felt I was much more ready. And my wife, she supported me the first time. She's like, just go for it, you'll enjoy it. She knows I enjoy learning and trying to figure out stuff about myself as well. But the second time, she was really supportive, because she knew I needed to figure stuff out, and she wanted to give me the space to do that. So that was really nice of her. She gave me that space. So, but at the same time, I was actually, funny enough, I was able to jam with her. I mean, she's been in the business, in marketing and other businesses as well. So she's got like a ton of experience in doing things. And we would sometimes go on these long dog walks on weekends where I kind of jam over, this is what we said in the academy, and this is, and she'd kind of question me a little bit and push me harder on some of these things as well. So it was all, it was really good to have that. However, if I think about the value of the investment, to this Christopher's point, when I had the epiphany, and then within a week I had two big gigs back to back, I was able to pay the academy fees for the entire period, like the whole year effectively of the academy, in less than half a month. So the value, from a value add point of view, we're several months into this now.
Hold on there, handsome. Hold on there. Say that again.
So from having the epiphany with you guys,
which was
being
roughly
able to iterate this.
How long into the academy did you have the epiphany, roughly, Thomas?
End of April. It was like actually around mid-April.
So after 6 months of working on your personal category design, getting into it in the academy, jamming with everybody, all the awesome people, the epiphany happens roughly 6 months in, and then what happens?
Within a week or so, I've got two big gigs that, from the way I was able to iterate my language, what I did, and within half a month of my billing, I had paid for the entire year of the academy.
And what's happened to your revenue ever since, Thomas?
I mean, obviously now it's going up, and I'm able to, now, of course, I've got more experience. I can iterate even more. I've got more examples, more case studies, and I haven't even got, the crazy thing is I haven't got time to write these. I've got to find time to write these case studies. That's part on my long to-do list. But also, it's given me the ability to, and it's funny, if you have people calling, and you always get LinkedIn shout outs, like people coming to you going, hey, I specialize in helping consultants with their pipeline. I'm like, my pipeline's fully booked until halfway through 2026. You can come back to me if you want, but I'm not worried.
You're wasting your spam cannon on me.
Yeah, exactly that.
You're like, let me teach you how to do it.
So yeah, in that regard, and also it's given me a level of financial freedom to be able to know that and while I'm really enjoying what I do now, and I'm working crazy hours, but I enjoy it. But I also know that I'll be able to, one of my kids has big exams next year, in May, and I'll be able to slow the pace, support her, and then I can pick up again at the end. And I know that now I've got that ability to switch it up and be more supportive and do stuff with my family when they have the need for it.
Hey Thomas, how old are your kids?
So I have one daughter who's 15 and another daughter who's just about to turn 14.
So my kids are slightly older, but as a father of teenagers, and it's easier for us to tell other people about it. But like, I guarantee you, your girls, they're both girls or a son and a daughter?
Yeah, both girls.
Both girls.
Yeah, both girls.
Your girls are seeing their father work extremely hard, add incredible value with a smile on his face. They are seeing their mom and dad jam together, their mom supporting their dad on this journey to take the leap and make the investment in you. And they can see, even though it won't be obvious to you, just like it's not obvious to me and my kids, and like they can see in you the transformation that you were just describing of like, my dad is totally different. He loves his work. People love what he does. And my hope is that I get to be like my dad someday in whatever field that I like. You are giving them an incredible gift. They will never tell you until maybe like 20 years from now or whatever else it is. But they notice, especially in the 14, 15, maybe 17, 18, they're a little more clueless about it. But they notice, and it is making an impression that will stay with them forever.
Yes. Yes. And Eddie's on a very important thing. I remember a guy I used to know who was a shrink, and he said something really interesting to me about this. He said that back in the day when families were farms or small businesses, there was the cobbler, there was the baker, there was the butcher, et cetera, the children often, more often than not, saw the parents doing the thing that they were best at. They saw dad in his most powerful form, farming, butchering, cobblering, whatever. They saw mom in her most powerful form, not just being a mother and maybe a homemaker, but also in the family business, or maybe she was running the family business. It was her business. But back in the day, children saw their parents doing the work thing they were most powerful at, that they were therefore self-actualized in doing, and the thing that, to quote George W. Bush, kept food on the family. And that was very powerful. Historically, in the new world, we haven't seen that. The interesting thing about work from home or work from anywhere is, to Eddie's point, now your children are experiencing their father, with support from their mother, extend his wings. And look, this might sound corny, but I would assert, fulfill your destiny, to do what you're here to do, to make the difference you are supposed to make, and to have the personal and financial rewards that go with making an exponential difference in the world. And when children see their parents create their own different future of high value, it's one of the greatest things you can teach a young person.
Yeah, amen.
Thomas, we're so excited for you. I'm so glad we had this call so you could catch us up on everything. And honestly, like, I just commend you, because I remember being in the first call of the Academy about a year ago and everybody figuring it out and everybody doing the work. And the fact that you said you went through and had done it again and again and again and again and didn't give up and kept pushing because you knew that something was there. That's what part of this work is, right? It's not easy, but it's worth it if you can stick through it and see it through and keep iterating. So
100%.
I'm so glad that you did.
I think I enjoyed the process as well. And it was a lot of fun. We had a really nice cohort of, and actually the occasional visits from the cohort one that also made it really cool, because they had that voice of experience, somebody come in and just add some extra flavor. And they sometimes chime in the boards and all of those, that it felt like a bit like, you're in back in school, and the kids in the senior year are sort of just mentoring you through some of these things as well. And that everyone was just super friendly and very nice. Yeah, it was. I think I couldn't have chosen for me a better time to have done this. For me, to be part of the second cohort was a huge honor. Anyway, I was like super glad to do it, and just to jam with everyone and just be able to be part of their process as well. because we had some really fun calls where we were just able to question our cohort and help them with their process. And that was all part of it. And some of the conversations that I had with the other people in the cohort just gave me that extra direction. And I think we all helped each other along the way. And then, working through the workbooks was, sometimes it's like the last thing you want to do after a day's work, right? You've got, you've come back, you've been doing whatever it is. And for me, sometimes there was, I had pretty easy days, but I could have imagined if you had a long day at work, sometimes the workbook is the last thing you want to do. But actually, when you let yourself go and you really sort of open up to it and start to actually be really honest about where your superpowers are and what your skill sets are, and you have those conversations and you can bring them to the table. I was super disorganized at first, and then I got way more organized. We came to the jam sessions with my work done, and I had some level of preparation. Everything started to open up to me, and I was able to have more honest conversations. Sometimes you just want to sit and listen, and sometimes you just, you could really just get in with someone and say your piece. So it was an epic experience, and like you say, I could do it again and again. That was the fun thing.
You are our kind of pirate, Thomas.
You're welcome back anytime.
You're welcome back anytime, because you know what, you're hitting on the cohort, and the value of the alumni will grow exponentially with every cohort. And so please come back anytime, drop in, want to jam on whatever. And then I would say, don't be surprised if we come back and ask you to share your wisdom with the next crew and stuff, because I think nothing would make us happier than to see the pirates helping each other. But
feel free to haunt the current cohort and thereafter.
I'm excited to see the new cohort and to
they're really, really, really powerful.
They're
the
really
new cohort,
exciting. Yeah, and you know what? It'll be hilarious. Is everybody in the academy, their pipelines are full up, not just because of their organic demand, but they're all helping each other out. I guarantee you, every alumni in the Category Design Academy will need help with contribution margin.
I think the cool thing was because we were from quite far flung places. I think we had people in Australia, we had obviously US, and some people in Europe, a couple of Brits, I think one in Ireland. So we had people from all over.
Yep, some Asians.
And yet everyone managed to figure out the timing to make the timing work. Sometimes the Australians, it was super early in the morning. For me, sometimes it was but it was just, to be there. It didn't matter what time I had to be up. I always wanted to be on those calls. Anyone who's doing this and is going through the academy, about to go through the academy, if you can figure out how to be on every call, no matter what time of the day or night it is, and come in prepared, the difference it makes to your experience on the academy is also just exponential as well. Just gives you another edge so you can really talk through your problems.
Amen. Hallelujah.
I'm going to share this with everybody. Everyone will have the podcast in the academy.
I got to tell you, you are, and the results you've had and the impact it's made on your career and your family and obviously your clients, you're why we started this. I shit you not. We dreamt about, could we make this kind of difference for people when we started this? Your success means the world to us, and congratulations. It's amazing.
Thank you. Well, I couldn't have done it without you all.
Well, thank you, Thomas.
The category king of contribution margin, everybody.
Absolutely. We love it. We love it.